Cleveland Browns have won 4 out of their last
Of
5
all of
games.
my bobbleheads are officially throwback. This one's for you.
This is a big one for me.
So before every podcast, we do a little bit of technical testing, make sure the cameras are working, make sure the audio is working. We give these guys a little joke about Rock and McFoley, a little riddle. What does that mean? Well, it's about empty arenas. And then just about as we're ready to start this podcast, we find out that the NBA is postponing their season, putting a halt to the season. Why would they be doing this? As we're uncovering this as we're talking just a couple of minutes ago, we find out maybe a reason why. And we wanted to talk Cavs. We're going to talk some Browns after this. Free agency is still going to go on. But major impact to the Cavs and the entire NBA, the NCAA tournament is now going to be without fans. But Drew, I'm going to go to you first here. Just uncover a little bit of what we've read as this story is developing and what you think about what's going to go on with sports here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, it's related to COVID-19, and I work in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't do any of the testing. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a genius, right? But I can say that the precautions make a lot of sense. Italy didn't take any precautions, and it got real bad real fast. So I sort of applaud the NBA and a lot of the things we've done here to try to limit it. But yeah, it's this is a virus that spreads real rapidly, and you don't know that you have it. Which makes it more likely to be spread. It lays dormant for several days before you start seeing signs, which is a big reason why it spreads so rapidly. It from what we can tell, it doubles every 6 or 7 days. You don't come to this podcast for news on this, so I'll shut it down there. But I think it makes sense to suspend the season, to postpone it, until we have a better handle on this, until we have some sort of idea of how the spread of this can be contained, and there's some thoughts that in the summer months when things are more temperate and a little more humid in the northern hemisphere, that this thing's not going to spread as much. It's true of most viruses. Airborne viruses anyway, they don't like the humid air. So I think you're going to see the NBA season postponed for several months. I don't think you're going to see it canceled, which is good. And what I think you're going to end up with is finally a chance for the NBA to get their schedule right. This is something that I've been trying to work my way into a podcast. The NBA season ought to start after Thanksgiving, and the NBA season ought to finish in August. It should finish right before. It should finish 3 or 4 weeks before the NBA season. You know what happens in sports in middle of June, July, August? Nothing happens in sports in June, July, and August. It is baseball and nothing else. There's training. We look forward to training camp. So what is my hope from all this is that the NBA gets excellent ratings in the summer, and they realize that they don't have to fear televising playoff games in July and potentially even into August. And you see them then delay the start of their season so that the players can have a full off season, and we get the NBA on the schedule that they should have been on for quite some time now. Let football have September, October, most of November. In December, that's when you get your sort of golden era. Basketball starts, football's getting to the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and it's going to be great. So that's sort of my silver lining that I genuinely hope happens with this postponement, that the NBA conducts their playoffs throughout this summer. They give themselves a full off season, and that we get basketball on the schedule that it should have been on. So that's sort of my takeaway from this whole thing. I'm going to take it as not necessarily not a positive, but I'm going to look at the silver lining. We try to do that here on the I Still Believe in Cleveland podcast. We try to find the positive in some of this stuff, and we're going to get into free agency, and I'm not going to give a positive about some of the things that that Andrew Berry has done. So we'll start off with that I hope that this sort of right sizes the NBA schedule, and they get that thing that it sort of kicks off right around Thanksgiving. It'd be perfect to kick that thing off the Friday after Thanksgiving. I think that ought to be the NBA's start of their season.
Well, you're certainly moving forward the story with adjusting the schedule here.
Yes.
We did see that earlier tonight, the Thunder and the Jazz were postponed, and something that has come out of this story and the NBA's announcements is that Rudy Gobert actually has the coronavirus, and this is something that people are worried about, that it's not just the fans and the tens of thousands of people who attend these games, but there's such close contact amongst players. Man, that puts a lot of things in question, that it's not just the fans, it's the players that could stop a lot of these events. Does this put NCAA March Madness into question? Does this put, dare I say, the XFL season in question? Eric, you're there in Ohio. We're in Illinois and New Jersey, but Ohio has been pretty strict with everything that's going on. What do you think about what's going on with the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, Governor Mike DeWine is, he's holding firm, and he is, kind of putting his foot down on the not attending things unless you absolutely have to, or that's your job. So that's crazy. But that's the time we live in, and seeing what had happened in Italy, I see what his plan is. You rather err on the side of caution, and you don't know until, unfortunately, and he wants to get to a point where we don't know. So, looking at this whole NBA issue, I moving the schedule back, like Drew said, sounds great in theory, but I don't know, most people don't know how far back this is going to be delayed. Is it going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months? I mean, if it goes further than that, who knows? I mean, you're going to start getting into the NFL season. It really depends on. We heard about Rudy Gobert tonight. Rudy Gobert's played against a fair amount of players in the last couple weeks. Who's he had contact with? Who have they had contact with? Who have they had contact with? So it goes down the line. So it's kind of scary, and I think that's probably a good idea for the NBA just to pump the brakes right now and say, hey, let's just assess where we're at and kind of go from there. It's it's definitely something that I can definitely say nobody in our lifetime. This is like such a unique situation. I mean, you have to go back generations to know what anything similar to this that has happened, but it's it's nuts. You look at the XFL. Obviously, if somebody has it, you're hitting players unless it's like an offensive lineman to a wide receiver. Those two will likely not come in contact. But NBA, you're likely going to come into contact with almost every single player. But there still could be XFL guys coming into contact. Baseball, the season's ramping up. It's going to be outdoors. Likely you're not going to be coming in contact unless you're sliding at a certain play or you're running into your own teammate. So, but I think right now who has the stage is basketball and hockey. Granted, hockey has a lot of clothing. I'm really drilling down, but that's what I'm doing is. But right now they're on the stage is what I'm getting at, and I can't wait to see what happens. I want to watch sports. I'd like to have fans, but I also don't want to sit in my house for several weeks. And I know many people don't want to sit in their houses for several weeks. And God forbid let that be the worst of it. So, it's such a unique time that we're living in. And I hope the worst is behind us, but from what we're hearing, this might not be the case. So, yeah, I'm just going to take it day by day, and I hope, I'm hoping for the best. That's pretty much all I can say for now. And I think what the NBA did was good to get out in front of it, and I think they're just going to do what I'm just saying is kind of just take it day by day, but they might go week by week, month by month, and just kind of go from there.
If they shut down the regular season, like stopped all the games, it wouldn't be the worst thing for the suddenly resurgent under JB Bickerstaff, under their suddenly resurgent Cleveland Cavaliers, who have, I don't know if you've noticed by the standings and judging by attendance, you haven't. That's a major league quote. The Cavs have managed to win a few and are threatening to climb out of the cellar here in the Eastern Conference. They are within one game of 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and 1 team in the Western Conference. They are 19-46, which is 1 game better than 4 other teams. 1 game worse, I should say, than 4 other teams. So, if the NBA were to say, well, that's it, we're just going to stop the season here and we'll get into our playoffs at the standard time. Not the worst thing in the world for these Cavs. They would have the second worst record, so they would have one of those 3 best shots at the lottery. So just keep in mind, should they decide to go that route, it is not the worst thing for our Cavaliers. I'd like to see them get some more time on the court together, but they like playing for this coach. And now you're starting to see that they're not one of the worst teams ever assembled, and it helps that Colin Sexton has found it, right? He is a really good player lately. He's averaging over 30 points a game in the month of March and February and March. So that's like 6 weeks worth of data that he averages about 30 a game. That is a lot. And so if we want to, shut this regular season down, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff staff is definitely connected with this team, but he just got an extension.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's looking good with him going into the future. Eric, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was gonna say that's actually a good point. I would not be surprised if they maybe didn't shut it down just to go straight to the playoffs, but just have like a set number of games that's not 82, because they realize that the regular season is long enough, and there's probably the top 2 or 3 or 4, that's being generous. Both conferences are the only teams that are realistically going to win the championship, and they're already locked in the playoffs. So that being said, I'm fine with that. Cavs, they're on a hot streak. They were 5-5 before last night. Now they're 5-6 under JB Bickerstaff. And they were 10. They're 10.5 back, and that's likely not going to matter anymore. So I like what they're doing. I like how they're playing, and I like what they can bring to the team next year, as well as what they can add. They have the development of Colin Sexton and Kevin Porter Jr., Darius Garland, Dylan Windler. Obviously, you could see what they can, add to the team. And, you still got your draft, free agency, and who knows what the veterans, Tristan Thompson, Andre Drummond, and Kevin Love are going to do. But I'd be excited for next year. And, yeah, selfishly, if they want to shut it down or just have, X number of games left in a month or 2, I'm fine with that. We'll defend the land in 2021. We're fine with that.
In the meantime, we're all Knicks, Pistons, Hawks, and Timberwolves fans. For those of you following the draft at home as close as I am, which I know all of you are, Knicks, Pistons, Hawks, Timberwolves. Those are the 4 teams we are rooting heavily for in these, whatever the rest of this season looks like.
All right, we'll see how the season plays out, but let's move on to the Browns, because there's been a lot of Browns news this week, and a lot of the NFL hot stove will not stop, even though play might in other leagues. We saw Christian Kirksey being cut by the Browns, another player who Browns fans have been very well connected to, one of the favorite players of Browns fans. He has had some injury issues, but he is gone. So my question is, we're a little bit worried about Andrew Berry here, but Eric, what do the Browns do next? Are they going to make a splash in free agency, or do you think Berry is just loading up his expectations that we will draft some defensive players and that will make everything right? What do you get us inside of Andrew Berry's head here?
Dog check. Sorry, I had to say that one last time. I miss you, Kirksey. Just like I had my bobblehead for Corey Kluber, I had to do my Christian Kirksey final farewell. Unfortunately, I don't have a Kirksey bobblehead. Okay, so what Andrew Berry will do, I hope he supplements those linebackers with other linebackers, but I'm scratching my head literally because I don't see that happening. I mean, we have options that they can do to replace these two linebackers, but I feel like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You got Blake Martinez, you got Danny Trevathan, you got a young linebacker coming off his rookie deal, played 16 games all season the last 3 years. Pretty good guy. Kind of reminds me of Joe Schobert. Good option in free agency. You could just re-sign Joe Schobert. Danny Trevathan, solid veteran who's been playing many years. I think it's his 9th season, but he hasn't been healthy all year, but he's been good for many years. Could just re-sign Christian Kirksey. So, again, those are like the only two good options I'm seeing, that you would just replace guys that you had not signed. So, assuming they don't sign those guys, you're back to square one. I'm sure they're going to sign somebody that can be a linebacker for this team prior to the draft. I don't know what direction they're going to go. I'm sure it's going to be, according to Drew and the spreadsheet, somebody cheap or somebody who can maybe give you 1 or 2 solid years at a good rate. I don't know. And then it just goes back to kind of other positions that need. I hope that they can make strategic business decisions based on areas of need, whether that's a Jack Conklin or Anthony Harris. I know those two guys are going to be expensive, but I've heard a lot of numbers being thrown out there. It's 61, 62 million under the cap. I don't know if that was before or after the Kirksey release, but regardless, they have plenty of money to spend. I think they should be able to move some of that money to guys that will be able to help this team and fill holes that we don't have to have filled with 8-9 draft picks. And I don't want to do what they did in 2016, which was trade down, and get 15 draft picks. All 15 draft picks were pretty bad, with the exception of, I'm sure there were 2 or 3 that were okay. Joe Schobert was one of them, yes. Now that I think about it, yes. They're adding more holes. I don't like it. I know the Schobert thing's not official till next week, but I don't know what Andrew Berry has up his sleeve, but right now it's not off to a good start. It's not off to a positive start. And, listening to sports talk radio in Cleveland, it's not very positive with the Browns. They don't know what his plan is, and they know they're sick and tired of seeing teams that we like kind of just shed solid players and then just hope that they can replace them with younger, cheaper talent, as opposed to, keeping things consistent and then, kind of getting yourself up to that salary cap and then kind of going from there. So, I hope all the best. I hope excitement. I hope a great draft. I hope great free agency, but I don't feel too much excitement or too hope right now. It's really worrisome as a Browns fan.
Drew, do you expect Andrew Berry to make a splash in free agency?
I want to say yes. I do. I don't though. I don't. There is nothing about this man that would lead anyone to say that he would want to overpay for talent. And that is what free agency is. In order to attract talent, there is a boatload of cap space out there for 25 of the 32 teams, maybe 20 of the 32 teams. All of the 20, well over the half the league has over $20 million in salary cap space. Every single team can afford to make one big free agent signing. And when that's true, guys get overpaid. It is how it works. It's why you want to try to lock up your own guys before they get there. And so the idea, is that you don't end up in this situation. It's why I hate the idea of getting rid of both Schobert and Kirksey. There's no one to replace them. Eric mentioned Blake Martinez. I'll throw another name out there, Corey Littleton from the Rams. He's 26. Blake Martinez is 26. Both these guys can play linebacker for you, but they're not going to be any cheaper than Schobert and Kirksey were, and I don't think they're any better. I don't see how this makes the team any better to create two holes at linebacker. Those were two starters at linebacker. When they were healthy, those two players at age 26 and 28 were better than Mack Wilson right now. That's not a debate, right? That is the objective truth. Mack Wilson's 22 years old. I'm not saying he's a scrub. He can be a starter in the 4-3 at one of the outside linebacker positions. He certainly has a spot. He's one of the starters now. But from what I can tell, this team has one starting linebacker. This team needs 3 starting linebackers in their base defense. Certainly needs another one, at least one more for their nickel. And I just don't see it, guys. I don't. And this doesn't even get into the fact that from all intents and purposes, from what it looks like, this has been pretty well reported. They are going to cut Olivier Vernon. Why? There is nobody else on this defensive line that can rush the passer. Myles Garrett, obviously. Who plays opposite him if you don't have Olivier Vernon on this team? There are some options in free agency, but they're not going to be any cheaper. I mean, Olivier Vernon has his cap hit is $15.5 million this year. There's no restructuring that, right? There's no guaranteed money left. He has 1 year on his deal. You pay him that money this year, and then you let him walk next year. That's the way a good organization would do this. They would keep a not very good, but a good pass rusher and not create a hole. If they decide to release him, sure, there's some guys you can sign. There's Jadeveon Clowney, Eric Armstead, Dante Fowler Jr. There's some talent there. But why, right? Like, why force yourself to take on all that guaranteed money for 2, 3, 4 years from now when you need the salary cap space in those years to re-sign Miles and Denzel and Baker, right? Like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand why they always have, like, every GM comes in and makes the same damn mistakes every single time. It's this whole my guy-itis. And what I really don't get is these guys drafted Joe Schobert. Like, why are you getting rid of him now? And it is extremely, you can tell in my voice, it is extremely frustrating to sit here and know for certain that here on March 11th, before free agency begins, that the 2019 Browns are better than what we have right now. And that just shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be that way. The team has over $65 million in cap space now. That is not counting if Olivier Vernon, receives his release. That number jumps to 80. That's $80 million in cap space. That's these guys' MO. They win the salary cap derby every year, and the product on the field isn't very good. And so, I mean, the team has 1 first-round pick, 1 second, and 2 thirds, and in those 4 picks, you're not going to come away with the starting defensive end, 2 starting tackles, 2 starting safeties, 2 starting linebackers. You're just not, right? So, yeah, I sure as heck hope that they're active in free agency. I have a lot of guys that I like. I like Brian Bulaga, an offensive tackle from the Packers. I like Javon Hargrave, the Steelers' nose tackle. I think that the defensive line could use one more solid DT. I'm not sure, they don't like paying for depth, but the Steelers and Ravens both have a good DT that's going to be on the market. Michael Pierce for the Ravens. These guys are 26 and 27 years old. Like there is some talent there. Justin Simmons, Anthony Harris, Von Bell, Jimmy Ward. Those are all safeties that are available. These are guys that are all under 30. Bulaga is 30, but I have no confidence that they're going to go out and make a splash in free agency. It is not their MO. Their MO is to work the compensatory pick game, and and try to sign guys that get cut or things of that nature. So I have very little confidence that the analytics team is going to spend a lot of money in free agency to overpay for talent. That is what you have to do to get people to come to a 6-10 team. It's not going to be. That's what every team has to do in free agency. So I don't have a lot of confidence in it. You can tell I'm frustrated by it. We were told they're going to be aggressive. We were told this is different. We were told that this is the window, that they're going to go for it, that they're going to be aggressive, that they're going to add talent, obviously free agency hasn't started yet, so maybe I'm frustrated for nothing. But everything there, the entire history of this analytics organization leads me to believe that they are not going to go out and add 3 starters in free agency to replace the 3 starters that they are theoretically getting rid of, again, assuming Olivier Vernon receives his release.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a story that we're missing here. So, yes, the Browns did not have a great season, matching their expectations. John Dorsey fired
because they were coached by buffoon, right?
But is there something? Why was John Dorsey fired? Is this coming from Jimmy Haslam that he thought Dorsey was spending too much money, and that would just shock me. I am searching for a reason why you would erase a lot of this progress. Joe Schobert, Christian Kirksey had some injuries. That would be okay. And if we add on to that Olivier Vernon to say that we're going to subtract Vernon, Schobert, and Kirksey, what are you going to add in free agency? And I don't see it happening. I wonder if it's a story where Jimmy Haslam doesn't want to spend money. He only views this as a business. And I think that is certainly a negative. That is
a horrifying scenario.
That is a negative way of looking at this.
That is a terrifying scenario, man.
And we don't do that on the I Still Believe in
the consequences of that being true are too dark for me to go down.
The other thing you have to think about is, they're not guys that would leave, but there are guys that we might not resign is Hollywood Higgins and David Njoku. One's still under. I could conceivably see them walk away from both those guys. I'd still like to give those guys a chance. I'd rather have those guys on my team at cheap rates than not, but...
Yeah, Higgins is a free agent.
I don't know. Higgins is a free agent, yes. Njoku's not, but I could see them just walk away from both. I hope not, but...
Yeah, they've got 5 days to re-sign Higgins. Higgins is a good player.
Right.
It's
right.
The draft. We didn't get into it too much last week. The draft is really strong at wide receiver, and so you could find a Higgins replacement. But again, you're spending one of those 3rd-round picks on that, right? Right. It's still a hole that I would rather not use that 3rd-round pick on. Higgins is a good player. He'll be a good player for the next 3 or 4 years, right? He'll live up to that 2nd contract. So, yeah, if they lose him, I look at it almost like another, maybe not starter, but certainly key contributor.
I don't know what the hit rate is on the draft, if it's 50, 60%, but Andrew Berry, hopefully he realizes that it's not 100%. So if you get rid of 3 or 4 extra guys, that you're going to hit on those 3 or 4 extra picks to replace those guys. In a perfect world, yeah, great, go ahead and do it, but that's not reality. He can take those swings of the plate, but he's going to have some misses. He's going to have some average guys that are just going to be special teamers that he thought's going to be a linebacker or a wide receiver or a cornerback. It is what it is. It happens to the best of them, and he can't just replace solid veterans, B or A- to C+ players with, guys that might be able to do that job in the 4th or 5th round. That could be D or F players who we've seen many of those in the last 20 years or so.
My preferred approach to free agency has always been one guy. Every year you sign one guy that you think can be a starter. right? And you hopefully get that guy for a 3 or maybe at most 4-year deal. He should be in his mid to late 20s, so he can play, at a solid rate for those 3 or 4 years. And you can sort of reload that going forward, right? One guy comes off the books, another guy gets added, and it's money in, money out, right? That has always been the way I think you ought to do it. But when you open up holes all over the roster, now you've sort of boxed yourself into this corner. If assuming they cut Vernon and now you've got $80 million, now you got to go sign, just to get back to the baseline, just to get back to where you were. Now you have to sign one of those defensive ends I mentioned. My preferred choice would be Jadeveon Clowney, but that's a lot of money. Then you have to go sign either a linebacker or a safety, right? Like, okay, Demarius Randall, his contract's up. That's not a massive loss, but you need a body there, right? Now you have to get a linebacker, right? So, like, when all this stuff goes down, I don't see how this team ends up better than the 2019 version come the end of free agency. I'm having a really, assuming, again, this is all assuming they get rid of Olivier Vernon, like we've heard reported. But if they do that, I have a really hard time seeing how this team is better before the start of the draft than they were in 2019. And that is a crying shame. That's too bad.
Hopefully they do not get rid of Vernon. Hopefully they make a splash in free agency, so we have some positive
whole
things
thing
to talk
changes.
about.
Hopefully,
Whole
This
thing
direction
changes.
does not look good.
Yeah.
But let's move on to maybe some future Browns here if we keep on cutting and going lower and lower on the salary scale, and that's players found in the XFL. Boys, we got XFL week number 6, another fun weekend. But also another league that's going to be impacted by the coronavirus. But we've talked about that enough. The games are still on. The lines will still be offered in Vegas. So there's still a chance to win some money to buy some quarantine groceries while you're away. But Drew, let's start with you here. Who are you picking for this weekend's XFL games?
Yeah, a couple of really interesting lines here. I was taking a look at that the over on that. I want to say Dallas game. Dallas. I can't remember who the Renegades are playing, but yeah,
DC.
Dallas and DC. That those are the two best defenses in the XFL. They're playing each other, but the line on that game is like 35. It's really low. So, I think there might be, and the over has been a sucker bet in the XFL, so I'm going to stay away from that. But I would certainly look into that one maybe. The line I'm going to take, though, is the St. Louis Battlehawks. They are -3.5. They're going to be playing at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is kind of a hard team to peg. I like them one week, and they get their doors blown off. And then I think they're, okay, that's who I thought you were. And then you go out and do something dumb like beat Seattle and beat some of these, half-decent squads. So I don't know what I'm getting from the Vipers, but I know what I'm getting from the St. Louis Battlehawks. So I'm going to take them -3.5.
Yeah, so Eric, what are you thinking for this weekend's games?
Well, actually, ironically, I had the same. I could not tell the end of Drew's pick, but I assume he picked the same way I did. I actually picked the same game. I picked the Battlehawks to bounce back over Tampa Bay, laying that 3.5. I think they ran into a buzzsaw. Those DC defenders, you cannot beat them and DC in that soccer stadium. So, St. Louis going to go to the whatever the stadium's called down in Tampa Bay, and I think the Battlehawks are going to get the win. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to agree with one, but I think we're both going to be right on.
Hey, man, Saunier's been hot in the XFL picks. I don't mind that.
There you go. I had to make up for it from the NFL pick.
Yeah, I started off thinking about the Roughnecks -6.5 against New York, and thinking that they would cover, but I went with the Battlehawks as well, -2.5. That seems like that's going to be. St. Louis has a really strong following there. Fewer distractions that are going on in St. Louis. But to keep things interesting, I'd go the Houston Roughnecks -6.5.
Okay.
Big cover there that they need to pull off. I'm going with the Roughnecks, and we'll be watching XFL this weekend. We'll see what goes on in the wild world of sports, in empty arenas, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right.
Go Cavs.
Go team.